It is time to begin our unit section of the course on literacy and equity. So the purpose of this presentation is just to talk a little bit about what my expectations are for this unit, what we'll be talking and thinking about, what my hopes and goals are for the unit, and some of the types of work that we're going to do in this unit, as well as introduce you just to a couple of the key sort of beliefs and philosophies of the people who are doing this literacy and equity work. I want to say too, this is ideological work. There are beliefs behind this work, and so it's really about increasing your awareness that this type of work is going on and that these types of issues exist. And then you are being invited to reflect upon that and use what speaks to you, right? So literacy and equity, here we go. I want to return our attention to the essential questions for the class. We have been mostly, for the most part, in the first half of this course on the first few essential questions. How can we support rich literacy development in a secondary ELA classroom? And what does it mean to have strong literacy skills? So our reading of Gallagher, where he talked about this is what rich reading looks like in the classroom. We discussed a little bit about like critical literacy and how that is a 21st century literacy that supports students in the future. We'll be talking too about digital literacy, right? So those sort of what does it even look like to have strong, rich, literacy-rich classrooms, and what are students doing and what are teachers doing when that good literacy work is supported. So I hope you feel like you've gained some strategies that support those, things like modeling, things like pre-reading, during reading, after reading. We're just adding to the toolbox in this course for those types of things, and an increased awareness of what that really rich literacy classroom is going to look like. Now we're moving towards the bottom of this list of questions where we get sort of complex and really deep. And this underlined one, especially in this unit, how do issues of politics, privilege, and demographics impact students' access to rich literacy learning? So we're really talking about who has access to these rich literacy learning moments and who doesn't always, right? So we're really delving into sort of systemic issues in education. We're going to read, listen to, learn about people who believe issues in equity are related to systemic issues in education and in our society and our culture. And so we're getting to that complex level where we think about how our society interacts with our education system and how our society sometimes creates privilege for people or denies privilege to other people. So again, this is ideological. The things that you're reading will be ideological. So what will we be doing in this unit here? Well, as you can see here on the right, we will be going into the second textbook that's required for this course, Cornelius Minors, We Got This. I hope you really love this textbook. It's unlike any other textbook I think I've ever assigned or read. And it's really powerful, exciting, interesting. I think it's really motivating. As we read it, I will introduce you more specifically to some of the ideas in it, but you might want to sort of just flip through it to get an idea of it. So we will be doing Cornelius Minors' book in sort of a book club style. We'll read a couple chapters, we'll talk about it. We'll read a couple chapters, we'll talk about it. You'll also have various readings, some of them scholarly, some of them professional, that talk about different issues in equity and literacy, or issues in equity and education. So lots of various different types of readings and texts. We've got a TED Talk. We've got some, complex scholarly articles. We've got some professional resources, sort of similar to the fisheye syndrome, like teacher blogs and things like that. We will be doing inquiry, so that's sort of self-guided inquiry questions that you have about literacy and equity, and you'll be looking for resources that help you delve deeper into some of those issues or explore those issues. Notice I'm using the words explore and inquiry, so we're just sort of asking questions as a key mode of going through this unit, asking questions. We're not necessarily going to find 100% answers, and we need to be okay with that because the master teachers of America are still grappling with these types of issues and trying to figure them out. So we will not find black and white 100% answers, And we need to embrace that as we move through this section of the course. We will be doing an equity project. You will have a lot of choice and a lot of control over what your individual project looks like, in what you choose to focus on as an issue, in what your project actually looks like and focuses on, like what is your final product. So I don't want to get too far into that because it's going to be very driven by what your interests are, the questions that you have within this unit. I want to mention as well, a lot of the coursework that we'll be doing will be reflection. So you all have to be willing to reflect on your own beliefs, your own practices, your own experiences as a student, what you're seeing in your observations, your own knowledge about school systems and how they work, the things that you've witnessed and seen happening within the classrooms that you've been in, the classrooms that you're observing, the society that you live in. We have to be willing to confront our own biases. We have to be willing to admit that we've made mistakes in the past. And I am doing it too as we go through all of these things. The more we learn, the more we're invited to reflect. And sometimes that means sort of admitting what's off in our own practices, our own beliefs, our own philosophies, and then being willing to confront those things within ourselves. So I'm going to invite you to do some of that heavy work of reflection. Some students say this unit can feel sort of heavy, and absolutely, yes, it can. But we also need to acknowledge that we're not being asked to change this stuff single-handedly. So that brings me to the unit goals. I want to make really sure we all know we are not going to find or look for black and white answers in this unit. We are exploring, we are learning, we are reflecting, we are sort of expanding our horizons and what we are aware of, rather than looking for black and white answers, because you're not going to find it. And even when we do find black and white answers, it's not something an individual teacher can just implement on their own. Except, as you can see on the third bullet point here, there are things that we can do within our sphere of influence. So within our own classroom, basically, right? Within our own classroom, what are some approaches that are likely to confront inequities that we know exist within literacy learning, within education? So we will hopefully gather some approaches that we know are evidence-based, that we know are compassionate, and that we know really can help us make our classrooms, our individual classrooms, more equitable spaces. One huge goal is that bullet point number 2, just increased awareness that these issues exist. They exist in ELA because literacy, and probably you have a sense of this already, right? Literacy and equity are really correlated, right? Literacy is really, really attached to the idea of socioeconomic status. Literacy and race are sometimes correlated in, testing and things like that. So we have to be aware that these issues exist, and we want to be a little more educated about them so that we can have better conversations about them, right? And so that we can confront some of those things within our own classroom and make our classrooms more equitable spaces. That's our sphere of influence, especially as brand new teachers. We also want to think about the table. Okay, so here's what I mean with that fourth bullet point, awareness of the table. There are teachers, there are educators, there are professionals who are working really hard on equity things. So that table exists. There's people already eating dinner at that table, right? I want you to be aware that that table exists, and I want you to feel a little more confident, a little more able, and a little more interested in stepping up to that table. So that, if there's a committee at your school, and that committee says, we've got this equity issue. Look at these scores that students have. Look at the grades that different types of students have in these classes. We got a problem. I want you to be comfortable saying, I would like to do something about that problem. Even if you don't know everything about it yet, I want you to be able to step up to that table. And I want you to know that table exists in the first place. At your individual school that you get to, you might have to be the first person to say, hey, let's come to the table and talk about this. If you come to a larger school, those tables probably already exist, or some even smaller schools, right, where there's these really compassionate teachers who really want to think about these types of things. The table exists in society as well. You'll see conversations on social media about equity in education, and I want you to feel comfortable navigating those conversations. So as we move through this unit, we're going to think about several different ways that we see these inequities existing. Some of the first readings that we're going to do are just going to help us orient ourselves to, okay, what does it even mean? What does it look like? How do we know that inequities are existing within ELA classrooms and within education? So we're going to talk about things like achievement gaps, or some people prefer to call them opportunity gaps, where we see different subsets of students, different demographics that are doing better or worse in our school system. And we're going to think about why that is. You're going to read about things like asset versus deficit mindset, where we think about, okay, if we see these differences in achievement or opportunity, who do we blame? Do we blame the student? Do we blame the system, right? And we don't want to blame the students. We want to look at bigger picture things besides just it's them, right? That's going to be one philosophy that I invite you to subscribe to during this unit. We're going to look at things such as, how curriculum is different in schools that have more resources, and how that curriculum is often much richer in schools that have more resources. In other words, schools where students tend to be higher socioeconomic status get more opportunity, get better literacy moments, right? And things like that. And why that exists, we're going to delve into why those types of things exist, and what, if anything, can we do about that within our own sphere of influence. Of course, we can vote, right? That's the only real way, or one of the big ways we can change the overall picture, but what can we do within our own classrooms and within our own schools about things like that? If you guys watch Abbott Elementary, you got to watch Abbott Elementary because it provides sort of a really accurate, but also like a sort of a fisheye lens where it's sort of exaggerated with like rats in the cafeteria and things like that. So, but a look at like socioeconomic status and different types of opportunities, different digital literacy opportunities, art and culture opportunities that different schools have. Anyways, side note there. You got to watch Abbott Elementary on Hulu. It's really good. Get your free trial of Hulu if you don't have Hulu already, just so you can watch Abbott Elementary. Anyways, forgot what I was just saying, but we're going to ask some of these really big questions. I'm going to invite you into some of these philosophies that these teachers who really care about these things are thinking about. I want to mention too, before we wrap up here, we will talk a lot about sort of race as a demographic. We're going to talk about students, student groups in that way. But I also want to introduce the idea that that's not the only type of equity we're looking at, or that you can explore in your own issues. We want to think about different things like who feels safe at school and who doesn't. And you're going to get answers like not only different, demographics of race and socioeconomic status, and trauma-informed teaching is a part of this as well. But what about LGBTQ kids and equity related to those types of situations and those types of demographics? What about students who come from homes where English is not the first language? What does equity look like for them? And what are the clues that we have that we don't have equitable spaces for those types of students? We can talk to about rural students who often, because the schools are funded in a way that prioritizes different types of districts, they may not have access to the same type of opportunity as well. And socioeconomic status is a big factor in rural schools too. So it's not all about race, although that's definitely some of the focus and the attention that this issue gets. So I want you to open your minds to different demographics that might be experiencing inequity in our classrooms as well. So that's sort of the preview of this unit and where we're going with it. This week we have some basic readings that just talk about, quality teachers and access to resources and other things that we see as manifestations of inequity within our school systems and within our ELA classrooms. So it's really important that we be communicating through this as you're reflecting. If something strikes you wrong, email me. If you have questions, email me. If something was really exciting to you, email me so that we can keep this conversation open to substitute for that in-class back and forth that we would naturally be having. So that's going to be a really important part of making sure this unit is valuable for all of us. So as always, keep in touch. And I hope you enjoy this unit and learn some stuff too.